I was very fortunate to be in a class with a lot of forward thinkers. I was in the same class with Shola and Ezra, Paystack, Choma of Rivi now, formerly Payhipo, Kayode of Gigmile. There are a lot of us in that class that were kind of
continue calling it.
Back in the day, the Jumia Konga rivalry was not small.
Yeah, I remember.
It was not beans. When I was going to meet him, I could not go into the front door. I had to be snuck in through the back. There was a back elevator that I needed to come through, and then they needed to clear out a room, and they needed to clear out some space for me to pass through. And then when I was in Sim's office, I think they needed to put the blinds up because they could not hear in Jumia that I was talking to the guys at Conga.
Chikodi Ukaiwe, also known as Mr. Salad, is the CEO of Salad Africa. He was part of the founding team at Jumia, where he started the J-Force team and led the team responsible for 60% of Jumia's GMV. He later scaled Conga, leading to its acquisition.
I apologize if I gave you the impression that I was the perfectly molded child. I was by far, at least if you ask my parents, I was by far the most troublesome. First of all, like I said, I was the only boy.
Okay.
My sisters would swear I was spoiled. I was very distracted. By the time I entered uni, the only two things I kind of cared about were girls and PlayStation. Jason Njoku at some point emailed us and said, we wanted to buy 50 tablets. And then we were running helter-skelter because we didn't have the infrastructure. This is for the Gen Zs listening. Sunday morning, Sim will basically call me, 7:30. He'll be like, can you make 9 a.m. Breakfast at Ikoyi? And I'm there. Since 2012, when I got into this industry being like the startup ecosystem, I have not known anything less than 15 to 16 hour days. It was intense. We wake up early, we sleep late, we wake up early. The concept of rest does not exist. Very fast paced. And one of the people who I knew to be that fast paced was Tunde Kehinde. And then when we were at the Texas program, Tunde came and gave us a speech about rest. And I was looking around the room like, who is he talking about? And it kind of made me understand that he had also learned that you cannot continue that way because, and he said it like, a startup founder is just like an athlete. It is in everybody's interest that that person is well.
Borders shouldn't be barriers. Limitations shouldn't define potential. That's why we're evolving. Rainest and GitPay are now one. Empowering you to receive, save, and spend money anywhere in the world. Whether you're a freelancer, entrepreneur, startup, or a growing business, our platform is built to help you thrive locally and globally. Our new identity reflects on continued commitment to making finance seamless, connected, and borderless. One account, endless possibilities. Your money, your rules. We're making it easier than ever for your money to go wherever you need it. Building a future where Africans succeed in the global economy. Rainest, rebanking the next generation of African builders, thinkers, and doers.
I know that a lot of people would look and say, oh, you've done all of this. But for someone to really understand who you are and the path that brought you here, what are some of your pivotal early experiences that led you to this path, right? From childhood to education and all of that. What are those decisions and experiences?
Okay. I'll go back into my upbringing, kind of give you some context into how I am or how I think. So first of all, I am the only boy in my family. I come from a very close-knit family. I have two big sisters, my mom and my dad. Another very interesting thing or very important thing on my foundation is that I come from a multicultural home. My dad is Igbo, my mom is Yoruba. Some people joke that I have the perfect mixture for business. My mom is Ijebu and my dad is Igbo, which means I'm enterprising and stingy. which means I'm enterprising and stingy. But what that typically did for me was I'm very pro Nigeria. I have relatives from. It's very funny because I'm half Yoruba, half Igbo, but people say I look Hausa.
Mm.
At the airport, they always call me Sanu and stuff like that. So I'm what they call, I think, Wazobia.
Yeah.
So I'm very pro Nigeria, very pro economy, pro development. So that kind of came from my foundation. My parents are also pastors, and they're also academicians. So I grew up in a university. I also grew up in a church. So yeah, it kind of gives you some context into my upbringing. If I'm not reading my Bible, I'm reading my books. So I was brought up to be a change maker, to be transformational. Like I said, I come from a house of alphas, right? My mom is the firstborn, my dad is the firstborn. My big sister is the firstborn. It's just my middle sister who is not a firstborn. So I grew up in a house full of alphas. They are all me and my sisters were all C-level. My parents are leaders wherever they are. So it kind of give you like there wasn't really space for me to slack. They had laid a very good foundation for me wherever I went. Typically once they hear my surname, they're like, okay, they expect certain things of me. And in most children, that should be pressure, but for me, not so much. It was like, okay, very much excitement for me to live up to the precedents that either my sisters had set or my parents had set. So that's kind of like, my background.
So you didn't even think of rebelling once, like, I don't want this. Plus you weren't the firstborn, so there was no that pressure in quotes although you're the first boy though,
Yeah.
maybe that's.
So there's something I learned recently around the what's it called? The theory of leadership. Right? Some people are born with the trait theory of leadership. Thank you. Some people are born with leadership qualities. Other people learn those qualities to lead. I feel like there are times where even when I don't want to lead, if I find myself in a group of people, at some point they try and make me head of something or leader of something. It just happens naturally. It's just I think my
Your
natural
default.
essence. Yeah. So it's not really something I can avoid or rebel against. I also find, if I can be honest, that when I do lead, things move quicker. So for my own personal gain as well, I typically just say, okay, leave it alone now. You guys do this. So I'm kind of a natural leader, I guess.
Okay, that's good. Going forward, I know that you studied computer science. I'm curious in terms of those decisions. I know you said the home of alphas. Like, was like this is what you should study, or was it like, oh, what do you want to study, or what would the Lord have us do? Like, how are decisions made in that context, especially as you went on?
Fantastic. For everybody who's listening out, I'll give you one advice. Listen to your parents. Even the Bible says it. But if you listen to your parents, you will live long. So like growing up, I was transformational at a very young age. I didn't want to do anything conventional. Banking, all this, I didn't want to do it. Somehow, from a very young age, I wanted to go into recycling. I was very pro green. So I'm a sustainable person. Like I need to be able to see sustainability in anything that I do. So I always try and look at the end of every effort I make. And I'm like, most of these things have an end. Like, okay, you drill the ground, you get the oil, but then you have to drill the ground again, right? So recycling was one of the things that stood out for me as a kid, that you could continue to renew, right? That's like where my sustainability impact bug was caught. And I said that's what I wanted to do. And my mother was very supportive. But, there weren't a lot of institutions, I think, that could help me or guide me to that point. And when I was going to school, I went to this university, I think, 2002. And when I was going to school, my mom kind of had being in a university herself, she kind of had a vision that this computer science thing was going to be big one day. I didn't see it. No, but not a lot of people did. And then she said, this is what you're going to do. And I was like, no, I wanted to do chemical engineering or meta math. And
Metamat.
met and maths, metamorphosis. I can't remember the full name. Yeah, I was around rocks and chemicals and stuff like that.
Amat.
Yes, and material.
Okay,
Metamorphosis
material,
and
not
material.
maths, not mathematics.
No, material.
Okay.
Yes. So I was very. So my dad was a pharmacist. So I'm very chemical, and my sister is a chemical engineer. So chemistry was like a
Yeah.
thing in our home, and I really wanted to pursue that. So I said, "This is what I'm going to do." And then my mom was like, "You should look at this computer science thing." Like I was 16, I couldn't see it, but somehow my mom got me to, uh, and even in like their computer program wasn't that advanced. My mom got me into Babcock University in 2002, and yeah, it wasn't my choice, but I'm very very glad she kind of led me down that path. So yeah, it was a lot of my parents' influence into doing computer science, because in 2002
Yeah.
it wasn't popular at all.
It's banking or oil.
Yes,
Right. So for you to leave chemical, which was
yes,
supposed to be a part to
exactly.
working at a bigger
Yeah.
that. So you went on to study this. What was like, was it that you started studying kind of like, oh, this makes sense, or along the way you are like still dragging, like, oh, they told me to study this. Like, what was it? Because you made the decision, but
Mhm.
because I know that's what you also studied in
Mhm.
your for MSc, right? For
Yes.
masters, something similar. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm just curious, like, did you find out like, oh, this is a good fit, or
Mhm.
what was that? Was there a shift where you owned it and like, this is what I want to do?
Oh yeah, man. So again, I think I was very fortunate to be in a class with a lot of forward thinkers. I was in the same class with Shola and Ezra, Paystack,
Oh,
Choma of Rivi now, formerly Payhipo.
people.
I think Coyote of Gig Mile. So yeah, there are a lot of us in that class that were kind of
Continue calling the name.
yeah, there are a lot of people in my class who've gone on to do quite a bit of stuff in startup. But yeah, so I was fortunate enough to be in that kind of setting where we had young people. I entered university at 16. I graduated at 19. We were kids, right? It was very easy to get distracted. But we're surrounded by people who kind of were already thinking, forward thinking. So those are kind of people like we went to school with. And one particular thing about my course in particular, because I did information systems, the part of computer science, but with information systems. The measure code, they did pure computer science. So we would start off in similar classes, but then I would go on to do business classes, which they didn't particularly do. So my course was a fusion of computer science and business. So I did courses in accounting, I did courses in economics, I did courses in business. So it was at that point that I was like, okay, I'm not secluded actually. I'm not narrowed into just computer science. This course seems to be preparing me for something much bigger. So it was at that time I was like, okay, maybe they are onto something here. Because like I said, I entered school at 16, I was very distracted. But the more I went on, the more I saw that, these skills could I could work in computer, I could work in a computer related role, I could work in a business related role, which I went on to do, or I could work in a network. So anything I wanted to do, as long as I focused on my course, I could.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you said you were distracted. That part cut to me because she seemed like the perfect, the perfectly molded child. So I mean, what did that look like though? I'm curious, like, or what are like outside of, because it's just church book, right? I mean, distracted in what sense?
I apologize if I give you the impression that I was a perfectly molded child. I was by far, at least if you ask my parents, I was by far the most troublesome one.
Oh,
Oh yes. Oh yes. First of all, like I said, I was the only boy.
okay.
My sisters will swear I was spoiled by my parents, by my aunties, by my uncles. Um,
Only one younger to you.
no, I'm the last.
Oh, okay, okay.
So yeah, so I have two big sisters.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I was very distracted. By the time I entered uni, the only two things I kind of cared about were girls and PlayStation,
Okay.
right? Okay, and then I used to watch Naruto. So I typically I didn't know what a GPA was until maybe my second semester.
Wow.
I wasn't.
What made you know it?
So I think another thing to note about myself, since we are talking, is that you know people see me now and kind of think, okay, this guy is a social guy. I didn't grow up this way. I grew up a very shy kid. I had two friends, up until I had only 2 friends up until maybe I was 13, 14.
Mm.
And it was around my secondary school that I really started opening up, talking to girls. Girls started talking to me.
Mm.
And so I didn't feel like I had enjoyed my blossoming. Do you understand? Like, it was between 14 to 16. Like, I felt like, okay, girls just started noticing me, and I was like, now you want to take me away? Because I went to primary school in Unilag. I went to secondary school in Unilag, and it was only my sisters went to Unilag, so it was only right. I lived in Unilag, so it was only right that I went to university in Unilag. I already like set up my parties. I was going to join like a party club. I was going to get a car with my friends and just party and party. And then my parents took me out of that environment into the
Sweet.
woods in Ogun State. It was my first time outside, outside, apart from abroad, like outside of Lagos State. For the first couple of weeks, I felt betrayed, if I'm being honest, because I used to hear Babcock, but I did not know it was in the bush.
Mm.
When I was in Babcock, we didn't have tarred roads. We barely had water, right? It was, the first set, like we were, I think, set 3 or set 4 in Babcock. It was not as pretty as it is right now. So I typically felt like, I hadn't gotten enough of partying. So I really, really just wanted to party. And that's what most of my year one was about.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then it had a change of heart
Yes. I had a change of heart.
by year 2. I mean, what led to that?
Maybe my parents' prayers. But typically, like a lot of this stuff is fickle, right? After you feel like you want to party and party, after some time, you start to reflect on your life. Also, like I said, I was fortunate to be associated with a lot of people who were forward thinking. They were very young, but I would see the way they kind of focused, and that kind of influenced me. Also, I mean, your CGPA will tell you when to focus as well. So by my year 2 was when I genuinely started to sit up. Also, I'd gone home after year 1. I'd had some summer break. I'd gotten a lot of those stuff out of my system. And when I came back to school, I was ready to crush it.
Wow. Awesome. So going forward, you were focused. Did you like start building stuff in school? Were you entrepreneur or you just focused on school?
So I've been very entrepreneurial from a very young age. My parents too at some point were entrepreneurial, so I kind of maybe caught that bug from them. But from a very small age, I had been selling stuff. So I grew up in Unilag, like I said, in a block of 16 flats. And there were 3 high-rise buildings. So 16 times 3 is what? 48.
Yeah.
So you had 48 flats. My dad used to import powdered juices or something. And sometimes I would just like get from him on credit. I'm like 6, 7. I'll get from him on credit and I'll go to all 48 units and I'll knock on their door and then they'll give me 5 naira and then I give my dad 3 naira and then the 2 naira extra I would give my mom to keep for me until I tried to get that money back and realized that she wasn't keeping nothing. But I was always liquid as a child. I was always liquid. So much liquid that my mom sometimes would come and say, okay, give me 100 naira, I'll give you back, and then I'll make her sign something. And below 10, very, very liquid. And then in year 99/2000, the mobile phone boom started in Nigeria, and then I was smitten. That time you didn't have websites, you didn't have any of those things. The prices of phones were displayed at the back of Punch newspaper every Wednesday or something. So you would wait for Wednesday to pick up a Punch newspaper to know how much the price of Nokia 3310 was. So that means that you had between Thursday and Tuesday to sell at your own price.
Did the prices always change or what?
Yeah, of course.
Oh.
So they used to they used to put maybe it's 100, maybe like 500 naira or 300 naira. Those prices used to fluctuate. Not all the time, but some of them would. So what I would do is I'll go to Computer Village. I didn't have enough money for phones, so I started with accessories. My parents didn't know, by the way. When they go to work, they think I'm at home. I would enter public transport with one of my neighbors to Computer Village.
Are you in school or holiday or what?
So when I was in secondary school.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's 99 years. When I was in secondary school.
After school. Okay.
Yeah, so after school, there you go. After school, and then when we were on holiday as well. I would go to Computer Village, me and my neighbor, whatever money we could put together, we'll buy accessories, Bluetooth headsets, earpieces. So we start with accessories. After that, we then started into phones. So I got into uni maybe 2-3 years after I started that kind of phone business, and then I continued as well. I used to sell secondhand phones because at that time you know started having a secondhand market, and secondhand markets, if you know anything about the gray markets, you can prices are there's no RRP, there's no recommended retail price for a secondhand device, so I could also set my price. So I kind of like that area because I could set my margins. And then after some time, I started taking people's broken laptops to Computer Village to go and fix. Wow, I almost forgot about that. So yeah, I've always been an entrepreneur, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, good. And then you went on, and I mean, I know one of your, you will speak about your first a job that you have taken, but I know that you went on to join Jumia when it wasn't really, it wasn't as big as what it was,
Mm-hmm.
right? But before that, so just your experience, what you did there,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I think before that, I want to touch on like the other jobs you probably, no, scratch that. You did banking first, I remember. Yeah, because that part,
Very key.
yes, is key, right? But before banking, you also tried to get another job
What
at
job is that?
the airline. Right. So just take us through the
That's
banking. Yeah.
okay. So post uni, most of my friends went for masters or just went abroad. I was stuck in this loop for a year where we're trying to get a visa for me to go abroad. But it was just wasn't happening. I wasn't going for uni. I was basically just going to be abroad with my friends.
Oh, really?
And I had convinced my parents that look, I was not going to proceed with life unless I was in London. And after some time, they're like, okay, you know what? Let's kind of support you. So I tried getting a visa by myself without my parents' consent. You can imagine
Didn't work.
either they will not work out. After some time, they saw me struggling. They then said, okay, come, let's try and help you. There was a particular time my parents went to reapply for their visa, and they kind of put my passport in between theirs and submitted it as a group. They approved my dad's visa, they approved my mom's visa, they still denied me. I think I was denied 5 to 6 times before I got my first UK visa. So after some time, I realized this visa thing was not going to happen. All my friends were abroad. I needed to kind of figure stuff out. Yeah, I was almost a year out of school. I hadn't done NYC yet.
Oh, before you did NYC.
Yeah, before I did, I didn't really have plans for NYC. I didn't have plans for this country at all. So I was like, okay, you know what? This London thing is not happening. Let me face Nigeria. So I did NYC. I went to Maiduguri. We're not very popular now, but I actually did go to Maiduguri. I didn't spend the whole time there, but I spent enough time.
Did you redeploy or you were just shuttling?
I figured it out. I redeployed.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went to Maiduguri, did that. It was a very good experience. Very, very good experience. At that time, obviously, it was not as turbulent as it is now. Kind of showed me a different side of Nigeria. A place where, because I grew up in Lagos, right? The North, people give you their word, and people people go by that word. You tell somebody, "Oh, I'll be here by 4 o'clock." In Lagos, you're like, "Okay, where are you? Show me picture and stuff." No, it's like if that person's gonna be there by 4 o'clock, if he's not there by 4 o'clock, there has a very tangible reason. The first place I also saw that they didn't use to price things. If a bike man tells you somewhere is 15 naira, it is 15 naira. People didn't use to price. Anyways, after NYSC, I was very money driven. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to be in this country, I'm going to make as much money as possible. So I looked at all the industries and I said, okay, where can I make the most money the quickest? And the answer was banking. So I checked the top paying banks. At that time, this was 2007 or so, there was Oceanic Bank, Bank PHB, Intercontinental Bank, Zenith and Co. They didn't used to pay well. Let's just see those top 3 banks. And then I checked all 3 banks who had senior executives, which one were connected to me. This was before LinkedIn. I
Yeah.
did the work manually. And I found there was somebody who my dad knew in one of those banks. And he said, "Oh, unfortunately, I cannot get you into a Lagos branch. You have to come to Ibadan." So that's what I did. I went to Ibadan myself, did the tests, passed the tests, did the interview, passed the interview over a couple months actually. And then I got, obviously, training school was in Lagos. So by the time I was in Lagos doing training school, to the glory of God, I got deployed to head office because I got posted into the IT department.
To the glory of God.
To the glory of God,
Okay.
yeah.
Not.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was prepared to move to Ibadan.
No, I meant not through some pulling strings.
If the strings were pulled, it was not by me.
Okay.
So they typically then I got into head office IT, and we were at that time. This was about 2007. We were at that time at the forefront of what is now called fintech. We were deploying ATM machines, and this was the cutting edge in technology at the time.
Yeah.
We were barely doing internet banking. I don't even think we had internet banking at that time. People were still kind of getting accustomed to cards and putting their card in the machine and the machine actually spitting out cash. And we were kind of at the forefront of that. So I very quickly made a name for myself in the bank. I was the only entry level I led my own team, which was kind of like unheard of. And then I started to skew towards IT security, compliance, risk management, the boring stuff that typically
Yeah.
most of my classmates were going into database administration and Oracle and stuff like that. I was going more into security and all of that. So I kind of, owned that space. But there's one important thing: I wasn't happy.
Mm.
I was good at my job. I was exceptional at my job, but I wasn't happy. Like banking was not institutional banking at the time was just not for me. The corporate culture, you had to wear a suit all day. You had to be in before 8 a.m. I used to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and just stare into the abyss. So yeah, that was kind of like my first foray into working.
Yeah. Then from banking, you moved, or where was the?
To Jumia?
Yeah. Or I don't know if you.
No, from banking I went back to uni. So from banking, because and I think it's important for the young people to know, back in the day, you couldn't just experience exponential growth. Everything was systemic. So if you wanted to be promoted, you either needed to increase your educational status or you needed to spend the time. There was no hacking. There's no superstars. You cannot be an analyst today and tomorrow you're a vice president. It's not possible, right? Back in the day, it was very systemic. So if I wanted to be promoted, right, I needed to either spend time in the bank, let's say 2 to 3 years, or go to another bank and then go get promoted or go and get additional degrees. The IT security space was heating up, and it was like the next, frontier because the internet was gaining momentum. And I look, cybersecurity, this is where most demand is. So I decided to go abroad to kind of like further my studies, and that's what I did. I went to Manchester, spent about a year and a half, 2 years, um, and I came back, right, with my additional degree. And when I came back, the bank where I was working before was merging with another bank. So they needed legacy technology knowledge, which is the people who ran the technology team in Bank A, if they could help with the integrations into. Another thing about my bank was we were the first and only bank, I think, in Africa who were trying to incorporate um, new core banking software, which is now popular. It was called Terminus.
Oh yeah.
Terminus 24, T24. Most banks, GTB, all those guys were using, no offense, but they were using like Legit, they were using slightly older versions of core banking. And so we were very advanced when it came to like, the technology side of things. So with all of this premise, I just assumed that, when I came back with my master's, it would be a shoe-in. And then this, I think, was the most pivotal part of my entrepreneurial journey. So I went back to the bank and with my new degree, and I sat across the new head of IT like this, and I gave him my CV. So somebody had made a call to
Yeah.
get me in front of him. So I think that also didn't help his temperament, because he was like, who is this boy that everybody's calling me about? So he was already kind of apprehensive. And then he took my CV. I passed him my CV. And then he took a look at my CV. And then he said, why should I hire you? He now said, is it because of your master's?
Mm.
His table was a very big table. He was the head of the department. His table was a very big table. And it was glossy, right? It was a glossy table. So in trying to pass me my CV, he threw it on the table. But then because it was a glossy table, it kind of slid off. So in essence, he threw my CV on the floor. And when he realized, he had two options. He could have said, oh, sorry about that. But then his face was like, almost, yeah, I threw your CV on the floor. What are you going to do about it? And it was at that moment I said, I'm going to disrupt all of this.
Mm.
You know, I am not going to work in a big institution. I am going to disrupt, you know, everything that you guys are doing here. So I picked my CV from the floor and I thanked him and I left. And that's when I got the call from some guys at Jumia.
Did you apply?
Very good question. No, I didn't. So let me tell you what happened. My wife. So after I decided I wasn't going to work for the bank, um, my then girlfriend, who is now my wife, she had gotten work in a tech company called Sabunta. Apparently, they sold fashion online. I thought it was a scam because she was out of school waiting for NYSC. So they basically had her like buying fashion items to sell online. I just thought that this business model is very strange. But then later, like a couple months after, that small company merged with another company who sold phones called Kasua, and the two of them merged and became what is today called Jumia Nigeria. And one day my girlfriend called me and she was like, "Where are you?" I was like, "I'm at home." And she was like, "Can you come to Lekki today?" And I was like, "Why?" She was like, "Some people in my office would like to meet you." First of all, then somebody from HR called me and said, "Can you please send your CV?" I mean, I was looking for work, and I was like, "Okay, you know why? No, why not?" So I sent my CV, and then they asked if I could make it down to the office today. So typical banker, right? Only thing I had in my wardrobe was suits, right? So I wore my my jacket and my shirt and my shoes, but I did not wear the tie because I was rebelling. So I went to Walla Alateju here in Lekki. No sign, just a white building. Um, Again, I thought this is definitely a scam. And then when I got in, the first thing that hit me was that I saw a lady. This was like 2 p.m. in the afternoon. I saw like a lady walking around in shorts. Please, you need to understand. I'm coming from a banking environment. I worked in the head office, so it was strange to me. And I was like, "This is what you call office?" I was like, I was like, this company is not going to last 6 months. But okay, let's see what they want to say to me. And then again, something new. The two founders. I didn't know what a founder was, but then a company had two of them, and I was like, these guys are so distracted. What is it? What is two founders? And then Raphael, who's one founder of Jumia, and then Tunde Kende
Yeah.
sat across me, second founder, and I was like, these are your leaders, these young men. I was like, wearing shorts, no signboard, young leaders, this business is failing for sure. Right. And then they spoke to me, just like a chat. Didn't tell me, they didn't tell, there was no role discussed. They just had a chat with me. And it was a good chat. I mean, we just like bantered because they were like pretty young guys. So I just spoke to them. And when I left in the car ride home, they called me and said, look, we really want you to join us. And I was like, okay. Typically, when somebody wants to hire you, they'll send you an offer letter and all of that. They're like, look, all of that we can figure out when you come back the next day. So I went home, and then hey, I think I'm employed. I'm not sure because I don't have any letter or anything. And they also asked me to bring my own laptop, which was crazy to me because in the bank you could like you understand.
Yeah.
So I came back the next day with my own work device. They told me where to sit, and they're just like, okay. After some time, they came and called me and like, okay, look, this is how we're thinking about things. I was so because of my tech background, I assumed
Yeah.
technology company. I assumed it was something technical related. But then Jumia at the time didn't typically have any software work done here. It was most of the work was done in Portugal or in Germany. So so it was not a technical role. They asked me to lead partnerships. I didn't know what that meant, but apparently it was like I was supposed to talk. They were trying to do stuff with MTN and all of that, and they wanted me to kind of lead that. Get this? They said because I wore a jacket.
That's why.
Because I wear a jacket, they just assume that I'm a responsible guy. People will take me seriously and they were wrong. If you take a look at the organization, people are wearing shorts. And they're like, this guy wears a jacket. Let's get him to talk to the to the big guys for us. So that was basically it, and I think that was where my life changed. I always say that I'm forever grateful to Raphael and Tunde for, I think I'll say saving my, yeah, I almost say like saving my life because I really don't know where I'd be or what I'll be doing, even not for startup. Um, I got in like we're 2012, right? Before any of any company you see there was born. Jumia was the hot thing, and we were just a group of young people wearing shorts in the afternoon.
You used to have wearing shorts.
No, I couldn't because I was the one wearing the jacket. So we're just a bunch of young people who people now started taking seriously, and that was phenomenal. You have MDs of banks, right, who would be exchanging emails with us. Um, I would be talking to the likes of Mike Adenuga, for instance, and we didn't even have a signboard, but everybody was so curious as to what this e-commerce thing was, and how they could key in, right? So yeah, we were making a lot of waves, and yeah, and that's basically how it was. I was in charge of partnerships, trying to bring on the big guys, and after some time, um, I started getting way more involved in like strategy and strategic thinking and numbers, and before you know it, I was in charge of growth. When I joined Jumia, we were barely doing a couple orders a day. I remember when we did 100 orders a day. We rang the bell, ate pizza. We thought we had made it. Like this is can't get better than this. But now I don't know, I think maybe 100K or 100K orders a day or something ridiculous like that. So we then realized that look, there was a big gulf between people shopping online and people's existing culture of shopping offline.
Yeah.
So we got the idea of something we call J-Force, which is equip young people with devices, just like get them into areas and then get them to kind of like canvas people
Yeah.
to shop online. Because I think it's very important to note, by the time we started Jumia in 2012, there was a huge trust deficit. People had not finished trusting ATM machines to put in their cards. First of all, people didn't even want cards because the idea of banking was not to facilitate commerce or to facilitate transactions. The idea of banking was a place to keep my money.
Yeah.
So by giving them debit cards, you are giving them unwanted access to their money. Because now I can get money anytime I want, and they didn't want that. They wanted control. If I want money, I go to the bank.
Yeah. Or someone might be able to get their own.
Or somebody can be able to get my money. So people were still wrapping their heads around the concept of getting a card and trusting a machine within the bank premises. Talk less of taking that card and putting the details online. It was a huge trust deficit, and that's why Pay on Delivery was born. Pay on Delivery was us kind of saying,
trust.
This is us. We are trusting you first, right? We will give you the item. Pay us when you get
when
it.
you see it and you get
To kind of show, because we didn't have any big building with any big logo. Nobody knew where our office was. Nobody knew where our warehouse was. Nobody knew any. It's not like today where founders are superstars. There was no outlet for our founders to tell their story. Nobody knew who the owners of the business were. So we actually needed to do that to close out that trust deficit. And that's another thing that JForce did, which was we wear Jumia t-shirts and they will literally go out and be like, oh, I think I've seen your website before. Like, look, we're real people. Why don't you shop here? I'll give you 500 naira off. It was just me. So when we started JForce, it was just me and like three university girls. God bless them. I hope they watch this. I haven't done a good job of staying in touch. But they were like the biggest part of that story. And before you know it, it blew up into something else. We had thousands. At the time I left, it was maybe 600 people across
In
Nigeria.
Jeffers.
Yeah, who were kind of canvassing their local networks and canvassing the streets, wearing Jumia t-shirts,
Or helping them order. Because
helping them
when I
order.
remember, I was like, they will help you order.
Help you order,
I was like,
exactly. Yeah.
okay.
So, yeah, very grateful to have been part of that story. So yeah, that's basically, you know,
And then the folks from Conga saw you and said, come and help us to. What was the.
the transition. I mean, as you can tell from my voice, I was very, very attached to the founders of Jumia. Yeah, I'll tell the truth. I was very attached to the founders of Jumia, as you can tell. And we had built that company from a couple orders a day to, I think when I left was about 10,000 orders a day.
Wow,
And
that's
yeah,
significant.
and I personally, the teams that I led were responsible for maybe 60% of that GMV.
Wow.
So yeah, it was not, I was not somebody who they were willing to let go of, but the founders left. Both Tunia and Raphael left Jumia at some point. And then I just felt like I was rudderless. The new management very quickly came in and identified me obviously as a key stakeholder, and then there were all sorts of perks that were thrown my way obviously for me to stay. Also because I led the largest
Yeah.
team. I led the largest number of people within the organization, so they definitely didn't want me leaving. But then something happened and it's tied to impact, which I hope I'm able to talk about later. I started to get slightly, how do I put it? I worried about the impact of my work. Right? Like we're saying a lot of stuff, but what was I really contributing to the economy? Like I said, if you remember from my childhood, I'm very big on sustainability. So what am I really contributing to the economy? And I think where chance just met fate and all of that. At that time, Sim Shagaya, who's the
Yeah.
founder of Conga, reached out to somebody who reached out to me that he would like to have a chat with me. And it was a very big deal back in the day. The Jumia Konga rivalry was not small.
Yeah. I remember.
It was not beans. When I was going to meet Sim, I could not go into the front door. I had to be snuck in through the back. There was a back elevator that I needed to come through, and then they needed to clear out a room for me to, they need to clear out some space for me to pass through. And then when I was in Sim's office, I think they needed to put the blinds up because they could not hear in Jumia that I was talking to the guys at Conga. And I can never forget, Sim sat down on a stool or something. And then he basically just asked me, like, what do you want to do? Have you met Sim Shagaya before?
Yes.
Have you watched any of his videos?
Yes.
Okay, so you kind of understand what I'm talking about. Sim is a charismatic guy, to put it lightly. And he kind of appealed to the dreamer in me. And Sim just said, what do you want to do? And then, we started talking about the economy and what this e-commerce thing could really become. Because for us at Jumia, we were like very sales driven, we're very aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
But then Sim had a different approach, which was ecosystem building. So he was like, yes, e-commerce is nice, but the future of e-commerce is the ecosystem. You are enabling delivery, you are enabling payments, and I was like, wow. You're enabling SME development, you're catalyzing the economy and everything. Just like the recycling thing as a kid, it made sense to me, which is if we build out this ecosystem, we can basically turbocharge the economy, right? And that was it. That was the pitch. We were in that office for maybe 2 hours.
Wow.
When we're done, I was sold. Coincidentally enough, the guys at Jumia were also now trying to transition into a marketplace model, which is to bring in other players. As at the time I was there, we're very much a retail model, which means we bought to sell. But then Konga was already thinking marketplace, which is providing the technology infrastructure and let everybody just, the sellers are selling, the delivery guys are delivering. Everybody's just doing what they're supposed to do. What's typical e-commerce platforms do today. So far back as 2014, we kind of had the vision to build that. So yeah, that is basically what sold me. And before long, and I think it's important to note, when I made the move to Conga, it was almost a parallel move in that I wasn't really earning that much more. That's to show that I was really keen on building out that economic catalytic engine, because the guys at Jumia were willing to pay my asking price, but I just couldn't see the sustainability. I couldn't see that sustainability thing in that direction. But with Sim, I also saw my proximity to transformation much closer, in that with Sim, I will be with him, like we will be like, right.
Founder
exactly.
also? Was he also a
No,
founder?
I was not as a founder, but very close to the founder.
I mean, was he like another opportunity to be close to like the founder?
Exactly.
Like, because the founders of Jumia had left.
Exactly. Spot on. In fact, I did something that wasn't known. When I did decide to make the move to Konga, the founder of Jumia, who was also in Harvard Business School,
Yeah.
I think with Sim, made a call to Sim to basically just tell me, look, that's my guy. Yeah, like that's my guy. Make sure that you kind of take care of my guy. So
okay.
yeah, so I felt
loved.
I felt love. Yeah, so I was still like in the family anyway, so I felt comfortable enough to make the change to Konga, and that's what happened. So I joined Konga in 2014 as vice president.
Yeah. And how did that pan out? Like the things you wanted to do and
Oh yeah, Sim kept to his word, which is I basically did whatever I wanted to do. He painted the big vision for me, which was, look, we're going to create an ecosystem, and that ecosystem continued to evolve. We didn't even know the extent to which it was going to become, but he just kind of trusted me to kind of figure it out along with him. So in very early days, I worked very closely with Sim, weekends, Sundays. This is for the Gen Zs listening. Sunday morning, Sim will basically call me 7:30. He'll be like, "Can you make 9 a.m. Breakfast at Ikoyi?" And I'm there, right? That's passion.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was it basically. So my role was ecosystem development, which sounded very vague.
Yeah.
But it was step by step. The first part of the ecosystem was, let's get these merchants to actually sell on this platform, right? So we went and did a massive vendor acquisition drive.
Yeah.
He saw me spend quite a bit of time in places like Alaba. I had an office in somewhere called Trade Fair. I don't know if you know where Trade Fair is.
Yeah.
It's like the biggest beauty and cosmetics hub in Nigeria, close to First, like all those areas. I had an office there, and then from there we then find out that a lot of these guys were in that literate. We then had to put like a small team together to help them create emails. These are stuff that a lot of startups here, startups now don't have to deal with. We needed to be creating emails for people, taking picture of their items.
Yeah.
When they had orders, we had people who would help them accept those orders online, take wheelbarrows to go and collect their products, take it to where they used to ship. So there was a lot of trust deficit that we needed to, and a lot of education that we needed to do. We needed to tell them that, look, even though we're the ones collecting your money, we promise we'll pay you back at the end of the day. My madam must not know that this phone that's leaving my workshop, I've not collected money. You understand what I'm saying? So these are things that people are used to now. But back in the day, it was not. So a lot of education went into it. So after building out the marketplace, I think we got maybe like thousands of merchants. I can't remember the number. We had thousands of merchants. It was now time to go into something else, which was educating these merchants. So I was also in charge of merchant education. After we had done that, next thing was now delivery.
Yeah.
you see how we're trying to piece it. So after I had done the acquisition thing, it was then okay, how can we figure out this delivery thing? And the big task was how can we enable sustainable delivery within the ecosystem without without Konga having to be involved. So there was something we called so this drop shipping kind of arrangement. Yeah. So we had to kind of like conceptualize it from scratch because it didn't exist.
Mm.
We had to conceptualize it from scratch. And
Just explain what it is so that people-
exactly. So basically we wanted to give merchants the ability to be able to self-fulfill, which is when an order comes into your Konga, we want you to be able to go and deliver that item without going through any Konga infrastructure. So you need to mark that when an order comes in, when you are taking it, you mark it as shipped on your own. When you take it there, how does the customer confirm that this item is in good condition, etc. So we kind of try to bring out and build out that infrastructure. After some time, we then introduced a quality control element to it, which is you take it to a particular place, right? You take it to a particular place, it gets QC'd by Konga staff and all of that. And then we built out the franchise model. So this Konga space, we're not rich enough to rent houses all over the country. How do we do
Warehouses.
it? We then came up with the franchise model. It's very funny because the guy who kind of came up with that model is doing the same thing for Omnibiz today. So we kind of built that out, and yeah, it was a success. But basically just trying to see how we can enable the ecosystem. After delivery, at some point, we then got into something very related to what I'm doing now, which is B2B e-commerce. This is where I think I spend most of my time and made most of my stars in Konga. So now we have built an engine where sellers could sell to individuals, right, through a website. We had figured out delivery, we had figured out payment, we were figuring out payments, and we didn't have Paystack or any of those things at that time. We were figuring out payments, and it was like, okay, how can we now sell to businesses? I cannot forget, Jason Njoku at some point emailed us and said he wanted to buy 100 tabs, no, 50 tabs. He wanted to buy 50 tablets. And then we were running helter skelter because we didn't have the infrastructure. We didn't have the infrastructure.
Just 50.
50 because our infrastructure was built for individual e-commerce. 50 units was not really something that we thought one person would ever buy.
Oh, really?
Yes. And then I remember the email just said, look, I want 50 units. He had spoken to Sim, obviously, because they were friends. And then the email just got to my desk. And I was like, okay, how do we actually do this? Obviously, we did it like, we checked it out and we delivered it. But then we now started thinking, now, how many other people want bulk purchases, but don't think of us? Because when they think of us as, when I want to buy a phone for myself. So then we went, how do we now build out infrastructure for B2B e-commerce? And that's where I kind of spend most of my time building. We built out infrastructure where we could now, because we had merchants scattered across the country, we were able to do bulk deliveries to multiple recipients across the country. We onboarded customers like Unilever, Guinness, FCMB, the guys who do Pick Milk, just like FMCGs across the country. And what we typically would do for them is that they could just call us and say, Konga, can you please deliver 300 cows?
House.
Yeah. Yeah. They'll say, could you please deliver 300 cows to 300 recipients scattered across the country? And we were able to do that because we had merchants scattered across the country. And we had infrastructure scattered across the country that could QC. So we could place that order centrally and have those things delivered. So that's like one of the core things I built for Konga, B2B e-commerce. And it was wildly successful. I think we did maybe we used to do an order could be as big as let's say 200, 300 million. So at some point they just kind of kept me there. Don't leave.
What was the margin though? I'm curious.
So margins typically with multi-category e-commerce, they vary per category, right?
So, but were you? I'm just curious. Were you charging like a fee or okay? Fair
So
enough.
we charge our merchants a commission of every sale.
Yeah.
So if somebody sold a cow for 200,000 naira, for instance, I think the margin on livestock at that time was 10%.
Hmm. So that means hypothetically on the 200 million, on the 200 million
Yeah,
sale,
we could make them
make
like
20
10
million.
million. Yeah, easy.
And who
And
pays for delivery though? Is it part of it, or are you like where does delivery?
fantastic question. So one of the things that we also did was that, if you remember, we had introduced independent
Yeah.
delivery contractors. Was Cover 360 live that time?
Not
No.
sure.
We actually introduced some people who could do independent delivery. So we just brought them into that ecosystem, right? So you had merchants and you had you had delivery companies. And then as time went on, I also introduced banks because
Finance.
yes, so you had somebody in Kano who they asked to deliver, let's say, 300 fans to Kano, but then he has never dealt more than, he only has 50 fans in his shop because nobody in Kano wants that kind of nobody in Kano wants that kind of demand.
Yeah.
But then the guy has very good relationship with the OEM, which is the manufacturer. So what I did was we just introduced a bank, and then we would then produce a purchase order and say, this guy has told this guy to deliver 300 fans, but this guy has 50 fans. Lend him money so that he can procure, and when he delivers, I can guarantee that he will pay you back.
Okay. So he wasn't getting his money before, of course, because of the trust.
No, see, from the bank?
No, from the person that wanted to buy.
Oh, no.
So
Yes.
that's
So they will pay us post delivery.
Yes.
So that's why the bank was involved. So all this kind of, you know,
Yeah.
ecosystem.
So I was asking if like the fee for delivery was added. Like normally now, if I wanted to buy something, there's the cost of the item, then there's delivery fee.
Yeah. So yeah,
Right.
delivery fee was definitely always
Yeah. So
paid.
the margin was solely to Konga in this case.
Yes.
Not you didn't have to remove delivery from
No.
it after.
Because we
Okay.
always try to put delivery up front as well.
Yeah.
So they will pay for product and delivery.
Moving on, you went on to, I mean, this was, I'll call it entrepreneurship, but then you moved to like entrepreneurship, starting like businesses. Just run us through that experience. What led you to even leave Konga and say, I want to go and set up my own?
Yeah, I think you put it very, very well, which is entrepreneurship. I really thank Sim and Shola and the rest of the Konga leadership for giving me that opportunity. You don't typically get that as a young person. I basically did whatever I wanted. They just told me the core problem and they allowed me to build businesses using their resources. Some of them did not work out. Like for instance, when I tried to build what is today Chowdeck, we tried to build a food delivery business. I think we started with fresh foods. It did not work out. I didn't get the formula right. So we very quickly killed it and went on to other things.
What formula?
Whatever Chowdeck is doing right now that is working and Glovo that's working now,
Yeah.
we didn't get it right. So they allowed me to build businesses within their ecosystem, using their resources and using their people. And there was really no going back from there. My skill set was to build businesses because I was in charge of my P&L and my people. I had an HR business partner who would help me get people from within the organization to work on these projects with me. So I was already a founder within the business. So if you look back at my career, I was already like, what was I going to do? Go back to operation? Like, you know what I'm saying? So that was like basically what I was trained to do. I spent 4.5 years at Conga. 4.5 was one of the best time of my life. 4.5 years up until they got acquired by Zynox.
Yeah.
And Leo Stanike, and that phenomenal gentleman, who I wish I had the luxury of working with more, but it was not to be. So when we got acquired, I basically, Stanike and the rest of the leadership team obviously wanted me to stay on and kind of help the transition, which I did. So I was contracted to kind of stay on to help the transition. After my contract was done, obviously, if you've met Stanike, is a very charismatic man as well. And then he tried to get me, but I was like, look, one charismatic man got me to spend 4.5 years. I'm not going to fall for another charismatic man. I was like, you know what? I think it's time for me to see what I can achieve outside of the Conga environment. So I left in 2018. I went to America for a while to be with my wife and newly born child who I hadn't met. So I went to America. I stayed there for a while. And that's when I did that famous chart of my of my child eating, sleeping, because I had operated at a very high level for 6.5 years. And all of a sudden I did not have a job. So I started to fixate on on my child and started plotting graphs and you know, I mean it was very good. It brought us together. Anyways, so when I left America, I started a consultancy because, as you can imagine, like a lot of people actually wanted me to come and work with them. Jumia Konga just come and replicate the same thing for us. And I think maybe I was a bit overwhelmed with offers, and then I just decided, you know what, I'll create a consultancy and see how many
Yeah.
of you I can actually work with at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I created a consultancy, and my very first client was the Osun State government.
Hmm.
And my dreams of building a consultancy so I can work with multiple people went down the drain. 98% of my time was either working for Osun in Lagos or being in Osun State. And they made it pretty easy for me, right? They gave me like government. I was almost like a government employee, so I had like security escort, all of that.
Oh.
Yeah, so they would when I wanted to go to Osun, which I did
What
once
are you
every.
doing though? That help is
Yeah, I think I can talk about it. So basically, the problem statement is they were trying to reduce wastage of agricultural products, which would also crash the price of food.
yeah.
Good. So that was my assignment. My knowledge of sales, logistics, and let's see how we can use technology somehow to do it. So that was basically my assignment. I did that for 2018. So yeah, that's like my first gig. I did that for 2018 up to 2020, up until when lockdown happened,
Mm.
and obviously everything was disrupted. I couldn't go to a show anymore, and all of that. So just like everybody else in the world, 2020 was a time to pause, reflect, and take a look at what is your contribution. I remember I will wake up stuck at home and I'll look at my room and I'll see all my shoes and my clothes, and I'll just think, all this mean? What does it mean? You understand? Like, what exactly does it mean? Because now I can't go out and nobody's going to see them. So, what exactly am I applying my life to do? And that's where, again, the kid in me of recycling came back and impact. And I was like, look, I need to build something that actually, makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
So, stuck at home, there's a woman close to my house that we used to buy food from, not food like provisions, like all these
Yeah.
mom and pop shops. I think they call them kiosks. And I was wondering about her. That nobody's buying her indomie, nobody's buying her bread. How is she surviving? And I think I saw a message where maybe she reached out to somebody that could they please give her money. This is a woman whose livelihood depended on us visiting her shop. And I was like, and then I heard even a hotel or somebody was going to dry cleaning to stay afloat. And I was like, no, like nobody knew when the lockdown was going to be
Yeah.
over. And then I was like, look, these businesses are they are exposed to ruin if people cannot physically visit their shops.
Yeah.
And I was not thinking about e-commerce in the conventional way. I was like, what if people could prepare for these people's products based on their behavior? Which is, I'm sure all of us have that kiosk or malam or
Yeah.
somebody near our house that we frequently buy from. What if you could put money in an escrow account and you could continue to draw down from that account? And I went a step further and said, what if that account could be, let's say, instead of you are incentivized, so instead of putting 10,000 naira in your malam's account for 10,000 naira worth of goods, what if by putting 10,000, he added 1,000 for you, and now became 11,000 naira worth of products you could access. And it started to get interesting. And one night around 2 a.m., I messaged two of my friends and I said, guys, what do you think about this idea? And these two guys they're like anything, they're down for all, right? It was a couple of minutes, we're like, yeah, let's do it. So that was like kind of validation I needed to kind of like, okay, let's build this thing. And that's how Show Love was born. Where it was to show love to your neighborhood store, right? By giving them prepaying for products that you would then draw down over a period of time. And how we implemented that was the conventional. We started with the gift card technology,
Yeah.
which is we now have to distribute a a a, a platform to every of these mom and pop shops where they could see their where they could see their credits per person, and everybody could just go cashless to go and draw down from their accounts.
Yeah.
So that's basically how um my first startup. I did not plan to start a startup. And that's why I always tell people like it was a non-profit. We didn't have, like most startups, when you're starting out, you have a business plan, you have a pitch deck that tells problem, solution, revenue. We didn't have any of that. We literally just wanted to help. And then I mentioned it to one of my uncles who said, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll give you guys some money to kind of build out an app. And then, but then before you could do that, I need to go and put together a pitch deck. So that's how we then started asking ourselves, what's our problem statement? What's our solution? What's our market size? Who are our competitors? You know, and then when we put the pitch deck together, the very first person we spoke to said, we're trying to raise $25,000. And the very first person said, this is too small. Gonna make it 50. And then I called one of my co-founders and I said, guy, edit the deck to 50. And then I spoke to somebody else and then he said 50 is too small. And then I called him again, guy, edit it to 100. $100,000. I just edit it. Edit it to 100K. And somebody else said it's too small. And then we put it to 150K. And I said, that's it. Like, we literally just want to build a mobile app and prove our concept. We're not, you guys relax. And then I shared the deck to one person who shared it to another person who shared it to another person. And in about 2 weeks, we had raised, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, we had raised $300,000.
You said, I thought you said 150 was.
Yeah. And just like people just kept giving us money. And when it reached 300, I had to tell my guys, I said, look, what are we going to do? Like,
But safe, right?
Yes,
Okay.
safe. So we then said, okay, you know what? Please don't give us any more money. We literally just trying to prove our concept. And that was basically it.
Post-COVID boom. That was.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
they're trying.
around
Yeah, when
people were, that's not going to happen for most people right now. I
yeah,
think.
the world is different now.
Yeah. But also I think, what also helped was there was a bit of, just like you kind of alluded to, I don't particularly tell my story around, but people in the industry who know me kind of know my track record. So I think a lot of people, when they heard I wanted to build something, they also assumed it was going to be an offshoot of something I built before, which was like revolutionary e-commerce stuff
Yeah.
or logistics. But I literally just wanted to help people. I had no revenue model. I had no plan on how to pay anybody back. But it's just like, it's a
Don't
lie.
worry.
It's
When you
easy.
figure it out.
When you figure it out. When you figure it out. And that's basically how Show Love was born. A couple months into it, we had tried, our proof of concept, put a small team together. The first thing that happened was obviously lockdown. Lockdown was over. And then we started taking a look, okay, we actually have to make money apart from helping people.
Yeah.
We actually have to make money. And then the next step in any startup journey is now to raise proper VC funds. And then we're now thinking, then VCs now start asking the real questions like, okay, where is this going to be in the next 5 years? how many African countries can you duplicate it? And typically, we're not ready for those questions. We really weren't thinking that far. We really just wanted to help SMEs in neighborhoods to stay alive during the pandemic, and that was basically it. So fast forward, but the North Star, I think the lights in the Shola journey was that we saw very interesting behavior, which is that at some point we saw large corporates buying volumes of gift cards, right, from us
To give
to
to
give to their employees. And we were like, okay, this makes sense. We're doing maybe as much as maybe 20 million naira worth of gift cards, to employees. But the interesting part was that we will find those employees come back to us, like send an email. Hi, I just got this 20,000 naira gift card. Can you give me 20,000 naira cash? And then he was like, okay. And then we were getting more and more of those calls and more of those emails. And then all of us holding on, like, look, should we make a business out of this thing? Should we just charge them a percentage? I'm like, okay, we'll give you 15K. And people are like, okay. I was like, what? People are willing to part with 5,000 naira just to get 15,000 naira cash.
this is free money.
And we're like, okay, there's definitely something here. And then we started to do research. And then we were like, look, the main problem is that people typically don't have they lack liquidity in between the month. Right? They typically don't have liquidity in between the month. That's the problem they're trying to solve. They need a place to be able to get cash before their salary. And basically that's how, it was somewhere around that time I had heard of the guys at EarningPay working on something similar, which at that time was earned wage access. And then I was like, okay, this is basically the direction that we want to go.
Did you return? Did you pivot? So
You mean like did we from Shola to? I mean, yeah. So that business died a natural death. I think.
Oh, okay.
It died a natural death, and Salad was born, and we went in completely direction.
That's a lot. That's a lot of experiences. And then Salad started as that, I believe. And then I believe it's gone through its own evolution too.
Oh yeah. So yeah. So the story of Salad, I think, is very phenomenal. Maybe I should tell it more. So when I was kind of seeing that gap, like, okay, you know what, people just really want to draw money. Again, in typical fashion, like, let's try and solve the problem, figure out the unit economics later. We put together a USSD application, right? A USSD application that you could send a short code, and that short code will ping wherever your salary data is stored, right? So whether your salary data is on a system or is in an Excel sheet, that short code is able to ping and tell you how much you have earned during the month, right? So if your salary is paid every 25th of the month, between 25th and 25th is your payroll cycle, right? So that information is stored somewhere. It's either on your HR's desk in an Excel sheet, or you guys have invested in HR software and it exists there. So we built that USSD application such that it can ping that system, and it can return to you based on the dates. So if you send a short code, like, let's say it's know my salary today, right? It will, if today is the first of the month, that means you work 25th to 1st. It will ping it and tell you have accrued X amount of naira. We then took it a step further and said we'll be able to give you 50% of that amount at zero interest.
That you're not figuring out the business model yet, sir. That's why.
No, we had. So it will charge you zero interest, but we'll charge a transaction fee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we were betting on the fact that the transaction fee,
Small money.
The transaction fee, but if you think about it, small money,
Volume.
small money, big volume, but then it also accumulates because people could not take that money for a full 30 days. You draw on it maybe 10 days, 15 days before you get paid. So typically, people were drawing money for just a couple days.
Yeah.
And they were not really actualizing the entirety of their transaction fee. So that's basically how Salad was born. And obviously, in 2022, it was revolutionary, right? I think Salad and Ernie Pay were kind of like the two startups that were kind of pushing that earned wage access narrative, and very quickly globally recognized as well. A couple months after we had launched, we got into Techstars, which was super validating. Shout out to Techstars. And then the Techstars program also kind of, now we went from just like in a small room to actually like dealing with people who we're telling our model, was no longer in our heads. We're telling people who were actually been in the business for a very long time, and people were telling us, okay, this is where you should focus on, and that where you should focus on. And we basically doubled down on share of employee wallets, right? Which is, how can you integrate yourself into the into the wallet of an employee very early on, to be able to, first of all, take back any repayments that they will have. First of all, give them the loans and then take back any repayments, and then also add other additional features like savings and stuff like that into it. And that was our core, right? And we kind of doubled down on that. But then, typical me fashion, we started to take a look at the numbers and take a look at the trends and economic landscape. And our business model was almost risk proof on the employee side. If we lend money to an employee, we're 100% getting it back. But what if anything happens to the company? Who's going to pay us? Who's going to pay the employee to pay us back? And then we started taking a look at the macros, right? A lot of businesses now started to delay salaries and stuff
shutting
like that.
down.
And then it started shutting. Thank you. Started shutting down, and then we started seeing holes in the longevity of our model. And then I kind of tapped in, and this is when they say God has a reason for everything. I needed to go through that journey to land at what we are doing today. I kind of tapped into my experience, and I said, okay, look, what if we could replicate what we are doing for employees, for the people who could actually get us out of this economic mess, which is small businesses. Small businesses, and I'm not preaching, small businesses are probably the single most important entity aside government, right, that are responsible for the economic state of any country, right? Small businesses, they need to be enabled to work for you and I. They need to create jobs. They need to create wealth. They need to be able to create food, you know what I'm saying? And we're going to shift our customer focus into, because what we were even preaching was that the employees are the people who catalyze the economy.
Yeah,
but it's actually their employers, it's the small businesses. And then we said, okay, how can we replicate? These guys need to be turbocharged, and the main issue that they face is financing. And it's a huge problem because banks don't trust them.
Yeah.
There's no credit structure. They also don't trust banks. They are too expensive. Processes are too long. They ask me for my father's will and my father's blah, blah, blah. And we're like, we need to be able to solve this. What if we could replicate the ping to no structure and then deduct from source structure that we had for the employees and transfer it to the SMEs? And that's basically how we evolved as Salad into what we're doing now. So what Salad does is that we go into controlled environments like B2B SaaS platforms, e-commerce platforms, anywhere trade is happening, right? And we give those software APIs that allow them to recreate a lending experience within their app. So imagine a merchant logging on to Conga and seeing request a loan, and is able to request a loan within Conga. From Konga's environment. He doesn't even know he's within a bank. He just goes and does it. So we give digital platforms that that's infrastructure.
As opposed to Conga building that out for themselves.
Yes. Now, and this is why I say infrastructure. That is just the front end. We call that the loan originator. It's just to collect the request. It also, those APIs also pull proprietary data from your platform, like to tell me wallet history.
Yeah.
How much does this guy sell every week and blah, blah, blah. So I take that data, I take the loan So that data also helped me with qualification, which means the guy cannot come. You cannot sell 100,000 naira a week and come and say you want a billion naira. It has already qualified you based off your transaction history. So if you sell 100,000 naira a month, we already have like an algo that will tell you how much you can borrow right there on the app. So when you go there, it tells you already qualify for X.
Yeah.
Right. So that's how much you can request for. So when that loan is originated, right, it goes into a switch, or we call it our, what do we call it again? Internally, we call it our AI switchboard, right? On the other side of it, we've partnered with multiple banks to be able to facilitate these loans. So when that order enters our switchboard, banks can see it and they'll say, okay, I want to finance this one, I want to finance that one. And then they end up financing. And because we're integrated with the platform, we're able to collect the money directly from source. So what we are doing is we are helping that trust factor, right? First of all, I'm telling you how much this guy is making, right? In a seamless fashion. And I'm telling you that give him a loan, I'll collect the money back for you from source. And then I'm also telling the SME that if you request in an environment that you trust, I'm able to get you the money at fair rates fairly quickly. So that way we are able to then attack the problem that the SMEs are facing as regards growth, and basically helping them to do more.
So I guess just to zoom out, well understood. For Salad, you also had to raise money.
Yes.
Right. But this time you you knew, like, you were trying to build a business, so you had to. And then of course by this time that post-COVID boom has come down. So you had to go. I mean, there's a lot of convincing that needed. I remember, well, I recall, I mean, you think about your experience, your first investor, how helping someone else, how by helping someone else, the person was able to put in a word for you, right, to help, right? So, I think just briefly comment on that, because I mean, I think that was a very like you're doing something that looked counterintuitive. You're able to.
Oh yeah, so I'm happy to speak about that, and I really hope that this resounds with young people, not just people in technology or founders. I didn't apply to YC. I applied to Techstars. I was very specific because Techstars' ethos of give first aligns with me as a person and what I want my business to be. If you're a young person listening to this, I advise you to extend yourself, right? You give, you do. Sometimes without even, don't make everything transactional. When we started Salad, what we had was USSD. I had started fundraising very early, right? I pretty much know almost every investor that is Africa focused right now at some point. Spoken with them. And in speaking to one of those investors, the guy came out and said, look, you guys are early. I'm not going to invest in you. However, can you help me do something? There's another founder that he has, there's another founder that he has invested in, but he doesn't really know his way around Nigeria. Can I please can I please show this guy around? Not only that, can I also make him intros because of my background? Can I also get him intros into the e-commerce space? A part of me was like, wow. Like, but then I connected with the guy. I went for the meeting. It was not the best time, but I went for the meeting. And then after I met with him, I was almost like I was working for them. They would put me in group chats and then put me a copy of emails. And it seemed like the work I was doing for them was never ending, right? But I didn't stop because even till now, like I make time out wherever I can facilitate the furtherance of the ecosystem I do. And I basically did. And in one of those, help me talk to this person, help me talk to that person, I spoke to somebody who, I don't know why, but I just mentioned that, look, he called me at a bad time, and I told him, look, I apologize if I felt like I was snapping on the phone earlier. It's just that I've been trying to reach this particular person. That was TMI. I didn't need to tell him. I was trying to reach this particular person and blah, blah, blah. And then he was like, oh, he knows them pretty well, actually. I was like, my brother, let us, and that's basically how he introduced me. God did his stuff, and we got our very first check into Salad.
And from that, I imagine that typically when if you're raising funds, when you get the first person, as you say, this person has put in money.
Yeah.
So everybody now.
Everybody. Yeah. So for us, it wasn't like that, and I wasn't going to raise money like that again. But I really, really, and this is something else that I want to talk about. There is a huge gulf still left unaddressed between founder and CEO. It's a big gap that people seem to be neglecting. Just because you have a strong vision and you have a strong idea, let's even say you have a track record of executing, doesn't mean you are going to make a good startup CEO. It's two different profiles. And the difference between the two, I genuinely think it needs to be taught either the hard way or the easy way. I wasn't going to get taught the hard way. So very quickly, I opted to go into the textiles program, right? To prepare me. When you get into textiles, they ask you, what is your what are your objectives? People say, oh, fundraising, this. Mine was how to be an effective leader while being present as a father, so I was given a very peculiar request, but these were things that I knew were essential, right, to being a good leader, right? So I did not raise money that way, which was momentum, FOMO. I quickly went into the textiles program to become well-rounded before I collected anybody's money again. And that's basically what we did. We spent 3 months. Perfect program, because I previously had the option to join another textiles program. I got into, I almost got into two programs at the same time. I almost got into two programs at the same time, and I really thank God I opted for the Lagos program, because the other program would have just not been for me, and I don't think I'll have met my textiles farm,
Yeah.
who till today are a very big influence into how I operate. So yeah, I didn't raise money because of FOMO. I quickly went into the textiles program.
Okay. So we're first for 10 has been a very long conversation, but there are 3 things I want to touch on quickly. I think I will just follow them back to back so that we don't extend on it. I think the first is it's rest, your approach to hiring, and also like your family. So we'll just take them one. Right. For rest, I know you made a tweet a year or two ago saying rest should be scheduled as an activity and not like, it's that important that it should not be seen as that thing you do when you don't have anything else to do, right? And I'm just curious, how do you, because the environment is very charged, like you're working very hard, but for you to have that strong means you might have seen things, right? So just briefly, we've already touched on hiring, or we can tie those two together. Also, your approach to hiring, how according to you, you punch above your weights and can wait. You are patient, right? So I think just then we'll just round up with your family, and I know you're very passionate about your daughters. It's like 3x dad everywhere, even when you're going to give speeches that are not related, right?
They must know.
Yeah, that's it. So they must know, right? So just quickly on each, so we can wrap up.
So yeah, I wrote an article on LinkedIn about the similarities between startup founders and athletes. So maybe when you get some time, you can read it. The concept was given to me by an ex supervisor of mine, which is the CEO of Jumia, Tunde Kende. Since 2012, when I got into this industry being like the startup ecosystem, I have not known anything less than 15 to 16-hour days. Right? It was intense. We wake up early, we sleep late, we wake up early. The concept of rest does not exist. Very fast paced, right? And one of the people who I knew to be that fast paced was Tunde Kende. And then when we were at the Texas program, Tunde came and gave us a speech about rest. And I was looking around the room like, who is he talking about? And it kind of made me understand that he had also learned that you cannot continue that way, because, and he said it like, a startup founder is just like an athlete. It is in everybody's interest that that person is well.
Mm.
Not just physically. I don't know if you watch football, but even if
Yeah.
a footballer is physically fit, if his mind,
Yeah, family issues or something.
he will not perform. So it is in everybody's interest for that founder to be mentally, emotionally, and physically fit, right? So just like if an athlete will deliberately take out time to nurture, what's their name? Athletes have psychologists, as you
Yeah.
know, they have team psychologists, they probably have personal therapists, they have physiologists for they have dietitians. Founders should do the same because it's an extreme sport. In fact, we probably even do more mental gymnastics than they do, right? So it's not like a flex. Rest is not a flex, it's a necessity. And I'm sure my wife is watching it and just be like, wow, you don't mean it, Mr. Sleep at 3 a.m. But rest typically doesn't have to be conventional. Okay, go to bed at 9, wake up at, some of us, that's not how we are built. But you need to be able to schedule time where you block out everything to prioritize yourself. I think that's what rest is for me.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
deliberate.
Yeah. Thank you. Now to the hiring and just your
Mhm.
approach to that.
Mhm.
Like yeah, I saw that and I was like, okay, that stands out because it means you're either very focused on like, oh, I need this person, but just take me through like the thinking. How did you arrive at
Yeah.
that?
How I think about hiring is this. And this is why I say there's a big gulf between founder and CEO. A friend of mine who I think is a phenomenal leader, built a very good business for himself, non-tech. He's built a bank for himself. He called me one day and he said, look, you are the lifeblood of your business. Startup, right? Startup culture teaches us the complete opposite, which is that, first of all, the startup culture um, doesn't typically favor or smile on single founders. They prefer multiple founders.
Yeah.
One, because of risk. Second, because of like companionship, to be honest. Everything is shared, like responsibility and all of that. But then his approach was different, which is like, look, you need to understand that, first of all, own the fact that you are the founder of this business. Right? You have people who found who will start businesses, and then 3 years down the line, they get an additional person, and you say the person is a co-founder.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The person was not there in the beginning. You know what I'm saying? So co-founder. Technically, it's not true. But then he told me, look, you know what? You are the lifeblood of your business. You need to own it. You need to understand it. And when you do that, you understand your strengths and you understand your weaknesses. And then you bring in people, right, that complement both your strengths and your weaknesses. So that's why my approach to hiring is very deliberate. If I know I'm weak at a particular area, I'm bringing in somebody who is strong to complement me in that area. You know what I'm saying? If I know I'm strong in a particular area, I know that the level I'm looking for in that area is not junior. I need somebody who can go toe to toe with me. So that's how I pinpoint my targets.
Yeah, that's why you
Right?
stay on target.
That's why I'm very notorious for being patient.
Yeah, that's what you do.
For getting my people. I think I've waited as long as a year for somebody. There are other people that
Yeah, waiting for
I've
them.
queued up. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
waiting
yeah.
for them.
I've been hinting them. I just send a message from time to time. Don't forget, you're going to leave that place soon.
Or you
And
say
stuff
you
like
be asking, are you happy?
Are you happy with your so yeah. Also I've also learned that, aside from strengths and weaknesses, you need people who align with your
Yeah.
core values as a person. Cannot be understated. So that's why, again, the funnel keeps getting narrower and narrower. If you find somebody who complements your strength or your weakness, similar core value, and you can literally be a friend too, because this is where you spend most of your time in the office. Yeah, I think you should do whatever you can to go after them. So
Awesome. I mean, finally, of course, family. I know you're proud that is there a I'm looking back at your upbringing, right? And I know you had two sisters. You have, sorry, two sisters, and but you're very passionate out there. Like you said, if you're a school program, most people will know that your kids presenting because of how passionate you are. Where? Because I'm looking at your story, and where did this come from, and how Yeah, just
Hmm.
speak on it.
Yeah, I think like I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a very close knit family. I also mentioned my parents were academicians. They worked in university. They typically went to the office at 8. They closed at 4. Um, I spent a lot of time with my parents because they were there, they were present, right? My parents were not like the traveling type or like, oh, that is away on business. No, you wake up, that is there. We
Mm.
do morning devotion every morning. So they were very present in my life. And I feel like I owe it to my children to try and also be present in my life because a lot of the stuff that I am today, what I drew from them firsthand. And it's not, people don't do as you say, especially young people, they do as you do. And there's really nothing that my parents asked me to do that they didn't first lead with, right? And that is typically how I also want to be with my kids. Um, and I'm already seeing it, right? They're already emerging natural leaders in their school. Yeah, they're either captain of this or head of this. This is, I mean, I am the PTA chairman, but but I do not add that as any influence into the fact that they are now beginning to observe me and naturally just gravitate into into leadership roles. So it's very important for me to kind of like to do. And the more I have kids, I mean, the more I spend time with my kids, the more I actually understand God as well. And this is super for me because, when the Bible says that, be as little children, it doesn't typically make sense. But when you see the way little children are, they don't hold grudges, they move on very quickly, they are very direct. Um, he kind of understands you kind of understand how God wants you to be with him, which is like my children, if they want something, right? They have their ways. You understand what I'm saying? Like you also observe your parents. You know what your parent likes.
Yeah. So you go.
You That's typically how David was with God.
Yeah.
That's why God really loved that guy. So I'm also learning, not just teaching. I'm learning a lot from them because it's also helping my spiritual life. Wow, like the way my daughter just handled me. Wow, I really like it. Maybe I should try it with my father in heaven. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's typically um why I think family is huge for me.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm sure there are many people that would share similar, but your story was pronounced because you are very vocal about it.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, this is a.
Also because my I have 3 daughters. Is not completely common as you see. I have 3 daughters.
Are you done, dude?
Mhm. Please let me sleep in my house today. Me and my wife will answer that together as a unit. So
Okay.
yeah. So because I have 3 daughters, I also feel like there's a lot of stuff I need to do to prepare them. You have 3 multicultural Nigerian girls, right? They will stand out anywhere, and the way the world is designed is not typically in their favor, if you know what I'm saying. So I feel like I need to, along with my wife, obviously, there's a bit of work that we can't just let them go into the world and let the world actually tell
Train
them.
them.
So we actually need to. I like to think my daughters are very beautiful, so we have to do a bit of work, um, you know, being with them as well. So yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm sure we could go on and on. All
Mhm.
right. But thank you so much for your time. This has been very enlightening.
Same.
I'm looking forward to seeing you back online.
I mean, I am online. Yeah.
Sorry, back on, well, I mean, on Twitter.
I'll see what I can do about that.
Yeah, but I mean, just, yeah. And people looking forward to what's next from Salad and even you. Right. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yeah.